Hello, thank you.
Hello.
Thanks for the invite.
It's my pleasure. I'm really excited to have you here. So let's first start with Ricardo. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about you and also about your company?
Sure. So briefly on me, as Nayeli mentioned, I'm Ricardo Angel. I run a venture capital fund called Piva. But before then, in general, my background, I'm from Colombia. Went to school in the States, engineering background, consulting, banking. I've been doing venture capital for the last 20, 25 years. So what Piva is a venture capital group that invests in breakthrough technology companies that are looking to improve, to change, to disrupt the way heavy industries are built. And so we invest in things like energy, mobility, food, ag, construction, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And Jose Miguel, you want to
Well,
yourself?
I'm head of innovation marketing area at Endesa. Endesa, you might know, is the biggest electricity company in Iberia. We have 12 million smart meters, 9.3 gigawatts of renewable capacity, and more than 10 million customers. And we belong to Enel Group, which we are in 30 countries in 5 continents. So we are a huge multinational in the energy sector.
Brilliant. So let's start discovering a little bit more about the work that you both do. So if I start with Ricardo, what industry does Piva focus on? And especially when you look at the company that you invest in, their trajectory when you start with them.
Great, yeah, happy to. And so some of the industries actually I already mentioned. So we focus around the future of energy. So we're looking into things like renewables, energy storage, energy efficiency. Right now, of course, there is a big emphasis on things like hydrogen and eventually fusion as well. So we're looking at fusion, although that's going to be years away. We're looking into mobility, anything from planes, trains to automobiles. So we're looking into electric vehicles, drones. We're looking at aviation. We're looking at marine, and so on the mobility side, it's not only the vehicles themselves, but also how can you make them autonomous, right? And so that's what we're doing. In addition to that, we're also looking at fundamental material companies. And so if you think about construction, which is a huge, huge multi-trillion-dollar business, we're looking into things like steel. How can you make steel actually green? And so we're looking into ways to actually make them completely sustainable and make them better quality and also cheaper. And so we're looking into things like steel, concrete, cement, and so on. And lastly, we're looking into food and ag. And so something that is great is as we see the population of the world continue to grow, and as we see the standard of living continue to improve, which is great, we have to figure out how we're going to feed all these people. And so we're thinking about how can we develop different alternatives to food. And so agriculture and plant-based food as well. So.
Yeah, brilliant. And what about you, Jose? What's the kind of technology do you use at Endesa, especially when you're looking at the future in 2030?
First, a short brief about the energy industry. The energy industry has like 3 important pillars, which are generation, of course, to generate the energy, distribution, which brings the energy to the end customers, and finally, the retail. The retail is more complex in the sense that it has more capabilities to reach more different customers. So our view of the energy transition it has four goals, which is decarbonization. Of course, to have a net zero, we need that the energy production doesn't have CO2. Second, electrification. If we reach to produce net zero in the production, but the end users don't have all their processes with net zero, we won't achieve it. For example, one of the things he says is very important is steel. But you have to think that the customers need this energy transition at a fair price, because otherwise we won't be competitive and we will have problems in every country. Then digitalization, which is enable to have all of this. I think further we will talk about the technologies in digitalization, which are amazing what is going on there. And finally, the most important is the customer and people-centric, not only employees, but all the people. If we don't have this inclusive and we put together all the people with this transition, we won't succeed. So.
Yeah, brilliant. And I actually love the focus that you brought there as well, with the people, because that's one of the aspects when we talk about the transformation of traditional sectors. It's a bit of a challenge as well on how do we make sure that the people are coming with us as well. Yeah. So, Piva, what are some of the startup or the company that you guys invest in? What kind of technology do you think leading the way in this transformation?
So I'll give you a couple of examples. So I talked about steel, right? And so steel is the industry is about $1.5 to $2 trillion a year. And right now, the steel industry actually produces about 8% of all the greenhouse gases in the world, which is a lot, of course. And so there are a number of different companies that are looking to electrify the way you produce steel. And so if you're able to electrify the production of steel and power those operations with renewables, with green power, then potentially you will be able to get rid of 8% of all the greenhouse gases in the world. So that's a huge amount. And so one of the companies that we invested in is a company called Boston Metal, based out on Boston, of course. And they are developing a way to electrify the production of steel. That hasn't been done before. It's trying to do what the aluminum industry did decades ago. And so as you actually are able to electrify the process, a number of other good things happen. Number one is that you're able to use lower quality of ore, lower quality of feedstocks, which is great. The other thing is that you can make the whole process more modular. So it's still very expensive. It's still hundreds of millions of dollars to build a plant, but it's as opposed to billions. So it's more modular. And the promise is that it's not only going to be, again, more modular, it's going to be able to allow smaller, lower quality ores. It's going to be actually the same price, or we think it's going to be cheaper. And of course, if you power it with green power, it's going to be a lot greener, right? So that's a really great, very exciting company that we're working on. The company is at a smaller scale right now, and of course the challenge is to scale it up so that the product is available not only in the US but worldwide. Mm-hmm. And so that's one example. If you like, I can give a couple of more.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, we have time for that.
Another example is a company in the cement and concrete industry. And so if you think about transforming traditional sectors like construction, cement and concrete is a big part of it. Cement and concrete is the second material most used in the world after water. And so we have invested in a company, and there are a number of companies around the world that are trying to do this. We invested in a company that is actually modifying the way you produce cement. They do it with a slightly different chemistry, and they actually use it they run the process at a much lower temperature. And so the production of cement is actually greener and cheaper. Mm-hmm. And then you use cement as part of your concrete mix. And so they produce cement, and they also produce their own type of concrete. And so one of the magic things that they're doing on their concrete, or how they actually cure concrete, is that they cure it with CO2. And so when you cure concrete with CO2, what happens is that, well, a number of good things happen. Number one is that you can cure cement and concrete in 1 day, as opposed to 28 days. Typically, for you to cure concrete with water, it takes you 28 days to get to a certain strength. When you cure it with CO2, you can cure it in 1 day. So that's really good because you don't have as much inventory, your production can go up and so on, right? So that's one good thing. The other thing is that your concrete becomes denser. And when your concrete becomes denser, two things happen. Number one is that the characteristic, the performance of the concrete is much better because it's denser, it wears better, it will last longer. That's one. And then two is that sometimes in countries that have heavy winters, over time concrete decolors. You get these white stains from salt or from water and so on. So this concrete doesn't decolor. So it's greener, better performance, and we think it's going to be at cost or cheaper at scale. Right now it's more expensive because it's very small. They're producing this product already at a very small scale, so it's very expensive. When you grow it at a larger scale, the idea is that it's going to be cheaper It's going to be same price or cheaper than existing products with higher performance and greener. And so those are two examples. When we talk about electrification and grids and energy storage, I like to talk about a couple of other companies, but that's it for now.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And of course, one thing I would also like to touch up later on is the R&D process, especially when you're talking about startups and development research and all of that. Yeah. So how do you handle that? But before that, Jose, you talked about different verticals in terms of the energy, decarbonization, and all of that. So of course, there is also the influence of all of the other players that you also need to work with and coordinate. And how do you at Endesa manage all of that in addition with the technology that you use for all of that?
Well, before talking about the how, I think I'm going to talk about the what we are doing. And one example we have gives a very good view of the complexity of all the things we are doing worldwide, because we are a very global company. It is the communities. We have constituted communities specialized in technology. Why is that? When you look backwards, first, an electricity company, they don't really have to worry much, because we have huge power plants, carbon, gas, nuclear, and all the energy went through to the end customer, and you just have to manage like industrial plants. But we start to have distributed energy. This gives a really complexity to the grid. The consumer is more and more exigent, because he's not only looking at us, he's looking at all the digitalization and in other companies who have started first, like banks. So this gives a lot of complexity to the company. So in these communities, I'm going to say a few names, and I'm going to give some examples of projects we are doing. This is a blockchain community: drones, hydrogen, 3D printing, sensors, metaverse, wearables, new materials, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, robotics, energy storage. So why is that? Because people find out with this tech revolution that you need to specialize a lot, even for the business units. They are very good at what they're doing. So we get together all the people that are working in the same technology. One example very good is the artificial intelligence, but because the same algorithms, not exactly the same, obviously, the machine learning algorithms we are using in marketing, a project we are trying to predict how is the behavior of the customers. The same machine learning algorithms is being used in trading units to predict how the markets are behaving. And some examples I will give now on generation. What are we doing in artificial intelligence? Some interesting things. For example, with visual artificial intelligence, we are predicting maintenance to see the algae which is accumulating in the hydropower plants to better predict. With machine learning and analyzing the vibrations of the rotors of the windmills, we stopped to doing a predictive maintenance to really a real-time one. They know exactly what's going on in the thing. Of course, in customer care, the artificial intelligence is completely changing the way we process data. For example, now we are able to process all the calls we receive to increase the quality. In last years, the chatbots, the boss boys had developed to a level we couldn't believe this is possible. Now we are analyzing, for example, how is ChatGPT going to impact in our business. I think I will talk about that. Well, this is an example of one community which is very active, because this is going really fast. Another example in blockchain, we really scouted, we make a lot of effort in this community, because there was a super hub on blockchain, and we try to analyze really what could be implemented in our business line. And we developed a project which I lead personally, because I think it was very important, is energy poverty. Try to interchange all the information between public administration, utility companies, and the social services of the city councils. Finally, this project is going to start in production in Malaga's city council in July. It has been really hard, and we expect other city councils to go. And here I have to say that one fail is that finally we are not making it blockchain. All the user is the same. But we didn't achieve to have really a network, public network, private network to handle this. But this gives me another important point. Here, as I said before, the important is the people, it's not the technology. So we try to make it with blockchain because, of course, blockchain have important things, and we succeed because we have it in production with blockchain, and we really pass all the cybersecurity, all the load. But finally, the important thing is that the use case. The use case was really a pain for the social services, and we say, okay, we might go back to blockchain in next year, but now we want to launch it as soon as possible with one city council. Well, I could give examples of all, but I think if we have time, I can give more examples, so we keep on going with them.
Sure. Ricardo, it'll be interesting to hear about the startup in the energy sector that you mentioned as well, in terms of more examples and use cases on that.
Yeah. So Endesa, how big do you say Endesa was? How much generation do you guys have?
I just say
in general, how big is the company?
As Enel Group, we have 59 renewable gigawatts and 31 conventional gigawatts.
Okay, so 59, 31, 90 gigawatts, right? And so 90 gigawatts, that's a lot of power, right? 59 renewables, and if we think about the goal that right now a lot of countries, a lot of companies have in mind is net zero by 2050. Net zero by 2050, being carbon neutral by 2050, right? And so that sounds like it's far away. It's actually not that far away, right? 27 years from now, so it's not that far away. And if we think about how are we going to get to net zero, it's not really clear. Right, and so I do think that technology and innovation are going to be part of that, right? In the whole process, we need to do a number of different things. So we need to do what we do better, right? Make our industries more efficient. And I talk about steel, and I talk about cement and concrete. We're doing similar things in food and ag and so on. So you have to make existing industries more efficient. Another thing is that most of those industries are going to try to be electrified, right? And so we're going to be building more and more renewables. In the U.S. alone, in the next 7 years, there will be 59 coal-fired power plants retired as we try to grow our renewables, which is great, right? I love renewables, and they're becoming cheaper and better every day, which is great. And so in the next 7 years in the U.S., those 59 coal-powered power plants are going to be retired, and that's base load. And so when you have more renewables, which are very cyclical, right, when the sun shines or when the wind blows, and when you remove a lot of that base load, then you're going to have a big issue in terms of how are you going to make the grid stable. And so for you to be able to make the grid stable and resilient, you're going to need to have a lot of energy storage, and there will be a lot of energy storage in your car and in your home, but there will need to be a lot of new long duration, not 6 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, more like 2, 3, 4, 5 days, long duration, large scale energy storage, large scale like a coal-fired power plant, right? So hundreds of megawatts at a time. And so there are a number of companies that are trying to go after that problem, developing new chemistries and new technologies to be able to have long duration, large scale energy storage. And I'm investing in one of the companies called Malta, out of Boston as well. And so what they're trying to do actually now is to in a way kind of like improve on existing technology using molten salt. So molten salt as an energy storage medium has been around for the last 30 years, from solar troughs and technologies that actually have been used here in Spain. What this company is doing is making that process more efficient, cheaper, and more efficient, greener, and more cost-effective. And so what they do is when you have a lot of solar energy or wind production, you actually turn those electrons into heat, and you actually conserve or store the energy storage in terms of like molten salt, so hot salt. Salt is relatively cheap. And then, so you store it when the electrons are cheap, and when you need electrons at the right time, then you convert heat into electrons, right? And so it sounds pretty simple. It's actually not that simple, but it works and it's cheap. So anyway, that's one of the examples that we're working on energy storage, large scale, long duration energy storage. And then something that you may talk about later on is how do you manage all these assets to make sure that the grid is optimized, that the grid is well run, right? And so all of that, right? All of that is going to be done through a lot of really smart algorithms and different systems, which I'm assuming you're investing on.
You open many subjects.
Yeah.
First, I'm going to talk about the electrification. I have here some data. You have to think that, of course, now we are pushing the technology of the things that are needed, and the easiest part is the technologies that are really useful. Talking about heat, which is one of the things you talked a few times, we really have the technology to medium temperature between 100 400 degrees with high temperature heat pumps or solar process. That's fine to the level of technology we have today. These are for drying, evaporation, distillation, washing, rinsing, food preparation, transport, refrigeration. For that, we have the technology. We don't have the technology for the higher temperatures, which is being developed, like reforming and cracking in petrochemicals, cement, glass furnace, and steel mills. So there's going to be a lot of new developments in those fields, because, as I said, today is the technology, but you have to always think that you need a fair price for this to be achievable. From the storage, I totally agree with you that that's obviously, if you have sun, the production is going to be when it's the sun. If there's no sun, you have production. If there's wind, you have the wind. And if you have too much wind, like something happened last week in Holland, the price went minus 400 euro megawatts. That's crazy. That's crazy because that's going to ruin the people who are investing, because you have too much energy there. So what is the easy solution? The easy solution are the demand response systems, which allow in the grids to have markets so people can manage the load. This is from their customers. If you generate too much, you can do kind of like, for example, the pumping power plants. They have a physical limit, but you pump and then you storage in gravity, the water in gravity. Of course, systems like the salt, there are like 1,000 projects in storage. The difficult part is to know which one is going to be the good one, because everyone predicts very well the past, but the future is another thing. And another interesting thing is about the electric vehicle, which I think you are investing too. There's a panel after that, but just to give a brief about that. I remember when we made the first project like 10 years ago, we made a project with Nissan to a vehicle-to-grid system. We made the Smart City Malaga. We tested there the first implementation of cars in the world with Nissan. And at that moment, 10 years ago, was like crazy. Who is going to buy an electric car? Well, now I have an electric car, and there are many people who have an electric car. I'm very happy, and I will never switch to combustion. So things don't go as fast as we imagine, but they evolve. And I think you could talk a bit about your investment in electricity.
No, it's kind of funny, right? You mentioned like EVs, electric vehicles. Now they're finally starting to come up, right? But it's right now they're still under 1% of the fleets out there, right? It's going to take decades before we change them, even though they're working really well. They're really cool, right? And they're becoming cheaper and cheaper. Yeah. But it's taking a while. I've been doing this, as I mentioned, for a long, long time. I remember in 2008, I was looking to invest in batteries for cars and in electric vehicles. And so at the time, this 2008, right, 15 years ago, at the time, there were predictions that by 2010 there will be 72 different EVs, 72 different types of EVs, right? There were 3. right, in 2010. And so it took another 13 years where we're today. And for now, it's going to take decades before we actually change the fleets, because fleets are becoming, they last forever, right? 10, 15 plus years nowadays.
I recommend to attend the next panel, which they will talk about this with experts in mobility.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But I guess it's interesting what you say, it takes decades to change, not just in terms of the technology advances, but there's also the other part, which is the consumers' behavior, circular economy, and all of that. And I think one question, again, very speculative question, but do you think that we are doing enough and we are going to reach our goal by 2030, or there's still a lot of work to go?
Yeah.
I think we are not doing enough. And I think we should do more. But the thing is that not everyone believes this. This is a fact, because this is global and not all the countries are so involved. There's a lot of political reason behind this, but that's my belief. I'm not a scientific expert, but I talk a lot with scientists and they are very worried. But I think, on the other way, we are in a good path, because now people are more concerned and we are doing a lot of things. But the thing is that some people think that technology is just a matter of putting money, and this is a huge mistake. This is a huge mistake, and we have seen a lot examples of that. We are running out of time. I don't want to run on that, but I think you as an investor are more aware of all. When somebody comes, you multiply the investment by 10 and you have a result by 10. No, this is a huge mistake from my point of view.
Yes, yes. So trying to achieve net zero by 2050, so different goals. There is a 2030 goal, there is a 2050 goal, right? And so I think trying to get to 2050 net zero by 2050 is going to be very tough. I think right now we're probably not doing enough. I think the level of urgency. I agree. I agree, Jose. I think right now the level of urgency is not there yet. I think people are waking up and people are starting to see different effects. I think it's going to get worse, and before it gets worse, I don't think there's going to be a lot more focus. And so I think it will get done, but right now I don't think we're doing enough, right? But we're doing more than before. And so that's a good thing, and there is a lot more interest. I forgot now the count in terms of the number of countries that have signed up for net zero by 2050, which is great and increasing. The number of large corporations that have signed up for that goal is also increasing. The number of investors, trillion-dollar investors, and hundreds of billions of dollars going into it. That's a big thing, and so we're heading in the right direction. Yes. Yeah.
And for my part, I guess the only thing I'd like to mention, what I appreciate now, of course, you have said, are we going to get there is a question, but it's great that we're at least moving in the right directions. We talked a lot about electric cars and long journeys as in issues, but now we're thinking about how can we increase the capacity of the batteries, which is going to improve. But one thing I see a lot now as well in the innovation, the collaboration that's happening between companies, startups, and more. So that gives us a bit more hope, because it's not something that just one company can fix. We need policies and all of that. So. Yeah. That's great.
To add in a positive way, I think that's the real spirit of open innovation, because at the end, all the companies are realizing they can't go alone. It's possible, and there we don't have time to talk about this, but here's how do you manage this collaboration, because this is important. The companies want to defend their profit, defend their position in the markets. And that's the miracle of the open innovation, because at the end you search the best in class of every spot to develop this as fast as you can with the resources you can. And here is to end with some positive. This is where all the innovators and all the innovation and all the startups that are coming here at Summit, they have the spot, because there's always a spot. You have to be the best in whatever you do, to really push this energy transition.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you very much to both of you for this very interesting conversation. And of course, those who are interested to talk more, continue on the topic of mobility, as we've mentioned, that's the next talk coming up. And we are also talking about open innovation and collaboration later on this stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you.